It's summer in the South Atlantic, the time when millions of penguins come porpoising ashore to breed. When it's midsummer in the far south, it's midwinter in northern latitudes. It's September when the first parties come battling through the breakers. Encased in their thick blubber, they're proof against waves that would smash a human to pieces within minutes. This vast colony on one small island is over 6 miles long and contains more than 3 million birds, not only penguins. The penguins share the site with at least 200,000 black-browed albatrosses, as well as several thousand rock and king shags. It may come as a surprise that these wildlife wonders in the South Atlantic are British and are therefore as much a British responsibility as the people who live on these islands. In terms of wildlife conservation, the islands were always ignored by successive British governments, and they're not by any means safe from threats to the ecology in the future. So it's high time Britain and the Falkland Islands government recognized the greatness of their own wildlife assets and took steps to protect them. The Falklands lie 300 miles off the coast of South America. They're only 400 miles northeast of Cape Horn and the same distance from the South Pole that London is from the north. The entire population of the Falklands is around 2,000 islanders and 2,000 troops. Most civilians live in the capital, Port Stanley, the rest on scattered sheep farms. The Falklands were occupied by Britain just over 150 years ago. This survival program is not about the sovereignty issue. It's about the rights of the original natural inhabitants, mainly the penguins. Here, the Falkland Islands government has a heavy responsibility to the environmentally concerned people of the world. The Falklands consist of 2 main islands, east and west, and hundreds of smaller ones. It was on 2 of these, on New Island and Steeple Jason, that the survival team filmed the story of Penguin Islands. Steeple Jason is in the extreme west of the group. It's completely undisturbed. The island is about 7 miles long with a central ridge of high crests. It has a total population of around 5 million, all birds. The expedition arrived off Steeple Jason in the motor vessel Forest, captained by Jack Solis. The Forest carries supplies between islands and is almost the only means of communication with remote parts of the group. The team was equipped to stay marooned for at least 10 weeks. Some Falklanders politely suggested they were crazy. No one had ever stayed on Steeple Jason for more than a few nights since they grazed sheep there in 1968. Why should anyone want to stay on such a place just to film penguins? Most of wildlife photographer Cindy Buxton's previous films had been made in the warmer climate of Africa. Her assistant was a friend, Annie Price. The Royal Marines and the crew of Forest helped carry the girls' supplies ashore. Then they set off for what was to be their home for the next 10 weeks. Home was a partly derelict tin hut used long ago by the sheep herders. They quickly discovered they had neighbours, a family of upland geese. When the forest sailed away, Cindy's only link with the outside world was by radio.
This is the Jasons calling Stanley. Jasons calling Stanley. How do you read me? Over.
Despite the fact that their peace had been disturbed, the natives proved friendly. A Magellan, or jackass penguin, had its nesting burrow right in the back garden. Driftwood provided all the fuel needed for cooking, as well as for heating the bathwater. Fresh water was never any problem. It rains even more here than it does in Britain. Domestic chores had to be fitted in on days when the weather and the light were too bad for filming. There are 5 species of penguins in the Falklands: kings, Magellans, macaronis, gentoos and rockhoppers. Gentoos and rockhoppers are by far the most numerous. They are the stars of the story. These are rockhoppers. Each jump, with feet close together, takes a rockhopper about 1 foot forward. This method of progress, aided by sharp nails in the toes, is an adaptation for coming ashore and climbing steep, rocky slopes. They porpoise towards the landing ledges, sometimes leaping 4 feet in the air, hoping to land on their feet, but often flopping on their bellies. Rockhoppers nest on top of the cliffs in areas unused by other penguin species, so their ability to ascend and descend rugged gullies and rocky paths gives them an advantage. Once they reach the top, they have the nesting site to themselves, at least as far as other penguins are concerned. At this height, they're also safe from marauding seals. Rockhoppers are the noisiest of the penguin species, especially at the start of the nesting season. At the same time, they're also one of the most appealing of penguins. The gold crest and the bright red eye give them a somewhat comic dignity. The crest is only fully resplendent on the adult birds. Many of the colonies are shared by other seabirds. King shags sometimes nest side by side with the rockhoppers, but they tend largely to keep to their own areas. Their courtship is far quieter and more subtle than the penguins. The rockhoppers' most numerous neighbours are the black-browed albatrosses. Albatross courtship has a gentle and almost tender quality. The Gentoo penguins make their landfall at much the same time, though their lifestyle is different. They not only choose shelving, sandy beaches to come ashore, but they use quite different nesting sites to which they waddle rather than hop. The distinguishing mark of the Gentoo is the white patch on the head. The word Gentoo may come from the Spanish Juanitos, meaning little man. Like the rockhoppers, they nest in much the same site year after year. The long march to the colony is always orderly, determined and unhurried. Within 10 days of the first party's landing, the colony is full. Nest building with penguins is largely a ritual affair. In the Gentoo's case, it's sometimes a matter of balancing small stones. The courtship song of the Gentoo, indeed of any penguin, is a raucous bray. He, or maybe she, finally succeeds. As with rockhoppers, the preliminaries of mating and setting up house are noisy and cantankerous. Pairs form and break up, often to reform. If both have survived the winter at sea, partnerships from previous years are sometimes renewed. At last, the females settle down to brood their eggs. In the rockhopper and albatross colony on Steeple Jason, courtship and nesting is getting into full swing too. Rockhoppers lay 2 eggs. Birds whose chicks have to leave the nest soon after they hatch produce very large eggs. And penguins are no exceptions. The egg has to be big enough to contain all the nourishment these precocious chicks need. Outsize eggs take a lot of laying. The second egg will be more of an effort. It's usually even larger. As soon as the second egg is laid, the female starts incubating, but only for a few hours. Then the male takes over. Penguins are able to drink seawater, dispersing the salt through glands in the head. But at nesting time, fresh water is welcome, and the frequent rainstorms produce plenty. This isn't a freak clutch. Another female has laid the extra egg in the wrong nest. The householder guards it jealously, even from its real owner. Penguins have no land predators. This could be one of the reasons why they've lost the normal use of their wings. They've no need to escape by flying. But at nesting times, their eggs and young are constantly under attack from the air, mainly by skuas. Most nesting colonies face two main dangers. Firstly, from attack by bird predators, and secondly, from really bad weather. The penguins have to cope with both. Adult penguins are generally proof against the worst the Falklands can throw at them. Certainly very nasty storms can roll in from the Southern Ocean. If the winds get to hurricane force, the eggs may be swept away. But the Falklands rarely see heavy snow. And with its thick layers of fat, a penguin's problem is usually not how to keep warm, but how to stay cool. The Falklands climate is not very severe. For much of the year, it's not unlike England in a mild winter. Wet and windy is the usual forecast. Snow seldom lingers for long. Once nesting has started, the off-duty rockhoppers must regularly make the long journey down from the clifftop colony to go fishing. At first, the well-worn path leads down between the hummocks of tussock grass. Once the tussock has been negotiated, the rock hopping starts. This colony on New Island is at least 200 feet above the sea. Rock hoppers changing over nesting duties often make the journey up and down every day. At the steepest points along the trail, the rocks bear the scars of perhaps thousands of years of scarring by the sharp nails of generations of rockhopper penguins. Long tradition has established the best points from which to launch oneself into the sea. The trick is to try and judge when the wave reaches its highest point. Rockhoppers are very resilient. On a beach close by, the gentoos are coming ashore from fishing expeditions to take their turn at the nest. They dart straight for the sandy beach, surfacing only just before running aground. There are predatory seals offshore. Porpoising not only enables the penguins to breathe, it probably confuses the predatory seals too. As in a shoal of fish, there's safety in numbers. The touching thing about penguins is how completely trusting they are on land. Not since the early 19th century, when sealers occasionally raided the Falklands for skins and penguin oil, has wildlife had so little to fear from man. Falklands sheep farmers are, in the main, proud of the rockhoppers and gentoos making their way to the colonies on their land. However, this is local and voluntary protection that depends on individual goodwill. There's no guarantee this will last forever, especially if tourism increases. So in the long run, Falkland penguins need legal protection. For the rockhoppers, low tide produces some landing problems. It exposes thick beds of tangled seaweed called giant kelp. The cunning ones wait for a big wave to bring them within range of a sloping rock. Rockhoppers returning from the sea often do something that no one has so far explained. Having been in seawater for a number of days, they immediately take a swim in a quiet tidal pool. After bathing, they take a brief rest on the flat shelves around the landing area. Then, once again, they face the long climb up to the top of the cliff. Some colonies are as much as 500 feet above the sea. In these huge mixed seabird colonies, the team found they were completely accepted by the residents, including the nesting king shags. Ashore, the birds had no fear of predators, but by contrast, the ocean holds many dangers for them. In the Falklands, sea lions are the adult penguins' only predators. The Gentoos seem particularly vulnerable when landing or setting off to sea. The Gentoos appear fully aware when there's a submarine menace patrolling just offshore. They move further up the beach. There is no choice for them. They have to go to sea to feed themselves. The sea lion watches, knowing that sooner or later they'll make a dash for it. The target is more often a penguin returning to shore, perhaps because it's tired and therefore slower. A mass of returning Gentoos distracts the hunter, and this victim escapes. The hunter turns out to sea to lie in wait for an easier target. The extraordinary thing is that the sea lions very seldom eat their catch. It seems to be a lethal kind of play. The only winners are the giant petrels, who congregate immediately they spot a sea lion hunting. This oil slick is the product of one dismembered penguin. Here are some slow-motion scenes of the encounters that happen daily between sea lions and Gentoo penguins. The winds that give the seas around Cape Horn their reputation are no strangers to the Falklands. When they strike, they give little warning. A force 10 gale means little to a penguin. It carries on regardless. The identical spot 24 hours later. As suddenly as the winds come, they vanish. The time is fast approaching when the first chicks will hatch out. At that moment, it's usually the males who are brooding the eggs, so the sleek, well-fed penguins, returning with full bellies from the sea, are most likely to be females. As soon as the rockhopper chicks dry after hatching, the parents feed them on regurgitated seafood. In one part of the colony, the black-browed albatrosses easily outnumber the rockhoppers. The albatrosses were equally relaxed about Cindy Buxton filming them. They start to nest before the penguins, but their young develop more slowly. Their fledglings will still be there when the young penguins have left for the sea. In their cone-shaped mud nests, the albatrosses have a less exacting task than the rockhopper parents. They only lay one egg. Their single chick is less vocal and demanding than the young penguins. The predators have young to feed too. Under this rocky overhang, a striated caracara, or Johnny Rook, is nesting. Prey, and plenty of it, is what a caracara needs to feed its own family. The caracara chick from the first egg that hatched is very much bigger than its sibling, and it gets all the food. That's often the way with birds of prey. The smaller bird probably won't survive. The relentless nest robbers, the skuas, have families to feed too. The skewer young leave the nest shortly after hatching. The parents then hide them among the rocks until they're ready to feed them. The chick is made to work a little for its meal. Skewers will scavenge any dead bird they find in the colony. They'll also kill any young penguin which wanders away from the protection of its parents. These skewer young have spotted their parents' kill. One advances confidently, while the other, who may have hatched a day or two later, hides uncertainly. The timid chick still begs to be fed. The more advanced one has already learnt to dismember the kill. There are well-grown chicks everywhere. Throughout the whole huge mixed colony, young of all ages must be continually fed. King shag, black-browed albatross, rockhopper penguin. They're all being crammed with seafood. In this nest, the chick is almost as big as its parent. Whatever the size of their offspring, penguin parents are remarkably conscientious, giving them warmth and protection even after they've outgrown the available space. As the chicks develop a sense of balance, they creep out from under their parents and stand beside them. The next stage is for the rockhopper young to form up in groups of the same age, and the parents now go off to fish, leaving them on their own. The young seem to be able to find enough protection from skuas just by huddling together. For the first few days, they'll return to their nesting areas to be fed. On the open ground of the Gentoo colony, the system is rather different. When their parents return from the sea, the young birds have to chase them before they get fed. It's training for the time soon to come when they'll have to pursue their own food in the ocean. Feeding chases are an important stage in their education. King shags make their young work for food too, though in a different way. The chicks must pester the parents with their beaks before they get fed. Any large object is a potential meal. The last stage of the young penguin's development before heading for the sea is to shed all their baby fluff. A penguin has more feathers than any other bird, and when they're all being shed at once, the result is almost like a snowstorm. Even the flipper-like wings are covered with feathers, though they look more like small scales. At this stage, they're visited by their parents much less frequently. They're beginning to resemble the adults. The golden eyebrows are developing, but they won't come to their full glory for at least a year. This one is a late developer. When Cindy walked through the colony during this period, the young penguins were slightly apprehensive, but even so, they gave no sign of panic. Here is a fully molted bird, sleek and ready to start out for its real home, the sea. The young are fed less and less now, so that the incentive of hunger is there to persuade them seawards. A bathe in a feather-strewn pool is their first experience of swimming. The young venture further and further each day, instinctively using the paths trodden by every rockhopper for centuries before them. An adult is leading this party. Parents look for their own young along the trail to give them a bare minimum of food. At this time, the adults need a good deal of food themselves. Once their young have finally gone to sea, they'll molt their own feathers. Molting means that they'll no longer be waterproof or able to fish. So once they've got rid of their families, they face 2 or 3 weeks fast. Down on the flat ledges close to the sea, a good deal of argument still goes on as parents seek out their own offspring and chase away strangers. There are newly fledged shags in the gathering. Now it's a question of plucking up courage to take the first plunge. Some of the shags have already made it. One brave young rockhopper leads the way, and away they go. On the cliff top, the colony is now empty of rockhoppers. The only occupants are the photographers and the slow-to-mature black-browed albatross young. What swimming is to penguins, soaring is to an albatross. Both are masters of their respective arts. But an albatross needs longer to acquire the skills necessary to travel the stormy Southern Ocean. Parents still feed the fully fledged young, even while they're preparing for their first flight. One dusk or early morning, they'll follow their parents out to sea and become masters of the wind. The colony will finally be completely deserted. The last young rockhoppers to molt make their way to the sea's edge. The young of this season won't disappear from sight of land immediately. They'll stay close to shore for a while, gaining confidence in the surf, learning all the skills of diving and swimming, and most important, how to catch krill, squid, and small fish. You can almost share the feelings of a young penguin's first contact with the ocean. Next year, they may come back to the area where they were hatched, but they won't be ready to breed until they're at least 3. One or two bold ones may climb the rocky path and approach the colony out of curiosity, but they won't dare to enter. They're certain to be attacked and driven off by the adults. So mostly they'll hang around, sunbathing and swimming. Penguins live a long time, 25 or 30 years maybe, so they can afford to wait until they're more experienced before they raise their own young. There are serious threats to future generations of Falklands penguins. Oil is one. Oil from shipping, both commercial and tourist. There's also a chance that undersea oil may be found between the Falklands and South America. If so, then oil rig accidents present a terrible threat to the penguins. Again, most countries have declared a 200-mile fishing limit. There is still only a 150-mile conservation and management zone around the Falklands. Outside this, foreign trawlers are already sweeping up the abundant fish with unknown long-term effects for the penguins. The threats are mostly in the future. But environmental threats have a nasty habit of moving overnight into the present. Might not the Falkland Islands government make the world aware of the importance of their wildlife by declaring the bird islands a national park? At present, Britain doesn't possess a national park worthy of the name. Here is a supreme opportunity to protect the one natural paradise that Britain is still ultimately responsible for.